everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, snow's on the ground, Curtis.
Yeah, even down here in the beautiful south, it's snowing as we record this. I assume you've got several inches on the ground up there.
Yeah, I seem to have brought it back with me. I'm being accused of now. Because I was. Thank you for you were solo on Monday with Darren. It's been a bit of a theme that suddenly, isn't it? You had plenty issues last time, and then I was away this time. I hope Darren's not taking it personally.
Yeah, whenever we try and speak to Darren, one of us bails out. So,
Yeah.
but I'm glad you mentioned it because it turned out to be a really revealing interview with Darren. Because obviously this week, a lot of talk about that 4.2% drop in values in November, and of course that followed October's 4.2% drop. So Darren did actually share with me that he was getting a lot of flack, and I did see some of it on social media. So it's we'll have an extract from that in today's show, but it's worth listening to the full interview because Darren actually goes to some length to spell out how CAP HPI pulls its data together, where it comes from, and how it uses it. And I found it very revealing.
Yeah, I suppose sometimes until they go through it, you don't really know what they're working on, how they get the data, how often they're looking at the volumes and how it works. I mean, obviously, I've got the advantage of previously working at CAP HPI, but not everybody's got that detail, and that's the thing. We, when Darren and I speak on the podcast, isn't it, that we, it's all about the devil in the detail, understanding.
Yes,
and you need to understand the process to understand the numbers, really. But no, so it's been on top of that, it's been a busy week, and the quarter is very quickly progressing. But we must give a huge shout out to Umesh Samani, who is the owner of Specialist Cars down in Stoke-on-Trent. But he, fantastic, won the Used Car Dealers Lifetime Achievement Award, and subsequently he put a few thanks out, very humbly received the award, and I think it was a bit of a shock to him, but it couldn't be more deserved to such a gentleman and an icon of the independent dealer sector.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And, to get the recognition that he does deserve, as certainly as a founder and leading light of the Independent Motor Dealers Association, that was all part of the citation. And he did actually take to social media, posted a video of himself on LinkedIn saying how speechless he was, rendered speechless on the night, which anyone who knows Umesh well will know that that's a pretty rare event. But I think he was pretty much overcome by winning the award, and well deserved, and very humble about it as well.
No, I agree, and on the back of on the heels of the Car Dealer Awards and the Motor Trade Awards,
back to back, those two.
Tired people in the sector at the minute that have to go to both of them and stay up as long as they can. But comes that AM have just launched their deadline for the 31st of January, and obviously AM sort of stands out slightly differently, doesn't it, than those, because they're very much early in the year.
Yeah, so AM Awards, just when you thought we'd put all the awards for this year to bed, so, if you are thinking of entering the AM Awards, then you really need to start putting pen to paper fairly soon, because that deadline's going to come around pretty quickly.
It does. So they say, and again, there is the last, I'd probably say, the significant event of the year, the big event of the year. There's probably other little events that are taking place as well. But we've got the Ben Ball, which is taking place down at Old Billingsgate Market there in London. And it is the heart of the city. And that takes place next Wednesday on the 6th of December. But ahead of that in the morning is the NFDA and Judge Services, the driving digital special event, isn't it, taking place in the morning, and that's over at the Lord's Cricket Ground.
Yeah, so that's kind of a must-attend event. If you are coming down to the Ben Ball and you're a member of the NFDA, I should imagine you're going to be at Lord's Cricket Ground, because they've got a great lineup, some really good speakers, and hopefully we can report on that next week.
Exactly, and also on today's show, we meet up and we chat to Phil Jones and Lucy Tugby on the eBay Motors Group rebranding to Motors. Plus, we do chat to them about what's happened in terms of the November market view that we try and cover every time that's available for us to talk through some of the stats and figures from the market view. But fantastic time just chatting there with Phil and Lucy. So do please stay tuned to the back second half of today's podcast to listen to that catch up with Phil and Lucy.
Yeah, definitely. And we have been busy in Podland, because this coming Wednesday we'll have our latest catch up with ICDP boss Steve Young. Now, we talk to Steve on a regular basis every other month, and this month, I mean, it's fascinating because he's talking about the 2023 top 50 European dealer rankings, which are compiled, and all the analysis, all the data crunching is done by ICDP. We also quizzed him on his views on why agency is attracting just as much attention as electrification and dealer consolidation. And what I found particularly interesting was his take on why these shopping mall outlets are no longer just seen as expensive flag wavers. So, as I say, that's on your podcast feed from next Wednesday. Headlines this week are from Motor Trade News, AM, Car Dealer and Auto Retail Agenda. And they are: used car buyers are now more likely to stay with petrol or diesel than go electric. How car makers' EV registration strategy could impact used car prices. UK vehicle production on track for 1 million units. And talking of agency, as we do most weeks, we'll have an update on why Lotus could be considering dropping out of agency and reverting to franchise.
So before we look at these stories from Kurt's just ran through there, here's the interview there, an extract from the interview there with Darren Martin, who's obviously talking us through the November's 4.2 decline in used vehicle value.
So looking at November, how did the month actually track? How did it pan out? Because, as the editorial points out, there was a lot of movement, pretty much on a daily basis.
Yeah, and it was a continuation of October. So we saw a 4.2% move in October. Throughout October, we saw the same figure, actually, which coincidence, I guess, 4.2% in November as well. So that's on average. Some cars have been coming down a lot more than that, but it was evident really so we cut off for monthly subscribers around 5 days before the end of the month, and we published 3 working days before the end of the month. And you could already see before those monthly values were published that the values were already coming down. So when the market is dropping, and this hasn't happened for a long time, these kinds of movements down. Obviously, they went up similarly in 2021. It tends to happen all the way through the month. So every time we were looking at the data for specific models, the data was suggesting that we should put values down for most cars. Some stay level. Some actually went up. I think there was some Dacia product that went up in value over the last month. But in general, there's a relatively significant movement down, and that's based off what cars are being sold for in the trade. And then for our retail value, we apply a margin to that trade value as a suggestion, a recommendation for what dealers could sell for if they buy at those trade values. So, to answer your question, we saw it pretty much throughout the month, values coming down all the way through. And generally every time we looked at it, they were slightly worse. And there are cars being sold for very low percentages of cap. Of course, if they're from a fleet or a leasing background, those cars, they were put on maybe 3 years ago, and that was before prices went up in 2021. So their residual value that they placed on those cars is still a lot higher than what the current prices are for those cars. So they can afford to sell at a lower percentage of cap and move that volume on, which is what happens. That remarketers of vehicles will sell cars at what they feel is the market value at that time.
And we talk about context. Price drops in November are not actually that unusual. So how much of this 4.2% drop is seasonal, and how much is it part of this downward price realignment that we've been seeing since April?
It's difficult to apportion sort of different percentages to each of it, but yeah, you're right. Values tend to drop in November. We've seen movements of over 3% a number of times. It can also be quite stable, and last year it dropped by I think around 0.5% or something like that. So we actually had some strength at this time of year, but there wasn't so much supply there then. So there's no doubt that some of this movement is seasonal. It does generally happen as we move towards Christmas. People start to think about the festive period. There's winter fuel bills. There's obviously cost of living crisis at the moment. There are other things going on. So yeah, you've got the seasonal element, and then you've got the cost of living concerns around interest rates being high and negative equity in cars, and cars just being the cars they're looking to buy being more expensive, and people going and trying to get finance and not being able to get finance, or not being able to afford a deposit. If your mortgage has gone up by a few £100s, or even by four figures from people I've spoken to, are you going to go out and make an aspirational purchase for a vehicle? So the necessity purchase remains. The bottom end of the market remains relatively strong, but it's that top end and people we speak to, 15, 20 grand and up, that's where it's a lot more of a struggle. And yeah, that's based off seasonality, but also based off what's happening in the country at the moment.
Well, as we say every month, Phil, some great insight there from Darren. And as ever, there's plenty of detail behind this, and it is worth listening to the full interview because Darren does take us through how values changed over the course of the month. That drop of 4.2%, it was fairly steady over the course of the month in terms of dropping pretty much on a daily basis. But he also goes into the different market segments, the sectors and fuel types, plus his views on December and even January.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, there is a lot of detail, and interestingly, when we catch up with Phil and Lucy at the end of today's podcast, that they're talking about the market view there for November. There's a little, they do reference where there is a bit of that strength in the marketplace. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all values down. There's a lot of details in the figure there. But before we get to that, let's head over to Motor Trade News, and the headline is: more buyers likely to stay with petrol or diesel. Don't go away, this does it, Curtis?
It doesn't, no.
So
I feel as though we've been here before, don't you?
Doesn't it? I think some of these stories, we do have a bit of deja vu when we're looking at thinking, is this, we've done this before, but we haven't done. But no, this is talking about, obviously, in terms of start lines. They've done their survey with their dealer network, and this is in their used car tracker for November, and saying that 4 out of 10 dealers, that's 44%, think used car buyers will stick with petrol and diesel cars for longer following the government's decision to delay the new car electrification deadline of 2035. And saying that the tracker also shows that 29% believe the move will mean the used electric vehicle market will take longer to develop, whilst 19% forecast that consumer demand for EVs will fall.
Yeah, it is an interesting one, this, and it does follow on from research that we talked about probably a month or so ago from Motors, because they actually polled consumers a couple of days after the announcement, and the findings are very similar. Anyone in the market thinking about transitioning to EV and looking at that 2030 deadline being pushed back 5 years, less likely to make that transition now. It could be the change after next. So StartLine have come from the dealer perspective, and they also found that additionally, a quarter of dealers now believe it's more likely that motorists will buy a hybrid as a stepping stone to that full electrification, while 20% believe that EV prices will fall further, in addition to those recent reductions that we've been talking about. So there's lots more to play out on this, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously we covered a few stories at the time on that one, didn't we? And I think this was the consequence from that, the perception of the 5-year movement for the deadline, gives customers choice for longer, whereas really the main sentiment has been that it doesn't really, because of the ZEV mandate and OEM strategies on the transition to EV, that by 2030 there's going to be only 20% of brand new vehicles that could be non-electric, and the question is who's going to be making those vehicles, and what choice is the consumer going to have if they do want to buy a non-EV vehicle. So yeah, I think it's highlighting that concern on that movement of the government's decision.
Yeah, and the first half of this show is very much themed around what's happening in the used market, because the next story ties in neatly with this. It's from AM Online, and the headline is "Car Makers' EV Registration Strategy Could Impact Used Prices." Again, something that we have actually talked about on the podcast before, but this is based on new research by Indicator, and it suggests that tactical EV registrations by car manufacturers could start to impact used prices and increase demand. And Indicator go on to say that the used market continues to show more of an appetite for used EVs and hybrids, even if it is for the lower price models. And it goes on to say, we are starting to see more tactical based registrations from car makers for new EVs, which could undermine used prices and bring them down even further in the next few months. So I feel as though we've been here before, and again, this has got some way to play out before we know what's actually happening in terms of those used EV values.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we felt that the sector was, some would say, stabilising around used battery electric vehicles, but that was on the back of we know 10 months worth of falls of vehicle values. I think the challenge is now going forward that it still remains a significantly volatile sector as the market, new car supply market changes, and obviously that supply and demand in the used vehicle market starts to change. But in the story, Indicator do go into a few areas, saying that the average used car prices tend to ease back by the end of the year, but they are more than doubled from October into early November to 2.8%. So this is looking at across the European market, which leaves prices 14% lower than in January of 2022, and saying that the highest fall that petrol, that the period had seen in Europe for that time. And goes on to say that battery electric vehicles accounted for just 6.1% of October's UK sales. Petrol remains the most popular used fuel type, according to accounting for 49.3% of sales, above the 4 years of age, whilst diesel market share has fallen to a record low of 15.5%. So still a lot playing out in that fuel type market.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed.
So next up is our conversation with Phil Jones and Lucy Tugby. They're from Motors, formerly eBay Motors Group, talking about this week's rebranding of the business.
Next up on the pod, we're delighted to be joined by Phil Jones and Lucy Tugby, both making a welcome return to talk about this week's rebranding of eBay Motors Group to Motors. So welcome back to the show, both of you.
Thanks very much. It's great to be back.
Great to be here. Thanks, chaps.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you back on. It's been a little while. But before we go any further, tell us about the Motors giraffes reportedly sighted at this week's Used Car Dealer Awards, and just about everywhere else come to that.
Yeah, I've been going to these awards for a number of years now, and seen a lot of interesting things. But it's the first time I've seen a giraffe. I'm really proud of it. And as you said, Curtis, this is all about our rebrand to Motors. We're really excited about it. We think the new color, the new green is really bold and full of energy, and it reflects how our team is approaching things. And as much as it's a bit of fun, the giraffe sums up our determination to be different and stand out from the crowd. And we had green cocktails, sponsored the casino. You'll see the giraffe lots of places. Yeah, and it's about being shoulders back. It's about being different. It's about being fresh, and really excited about it.
So, I mean, to talk us through the recent announcements and what's been going on, and talk us through what's prompted the rebrand, and how much of it was driven by the new ownership under O3 Industries and Navoom Capital, and now that you're no longer part of eBay, and also the arrival of a new CEO, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, in its simplest form, the rebrand is a statement of intent to push the business forward. Like, Motors is the site that we own. It's the one we have the most control of, and it's the one we're driving major investments into. So it makes sense that we shout about it. And when we make announcements about kind of further investments or further kind of changes, it will all make sense to stitch it together rather than having to leap from brand to brand. And so, eBay and Gumtree are fantastic brands, and they remain a core part of our proposition. And as such, it's really delicate to make sure we get the right balance, because we want to shout about Motors, but we also want to make sure that people still recognize that Motors is the gateway to eBay and Gumtree. So as much as to the outside world, it looks like this is kind of an overnight decision, there's been a huge amount of work undertaken in the last 2 years. So 2 years now in private equity ownership. Barry arrived as our CEO June last year. And I'd say with new owners, with a new CEO, you're kind of pushed quite hard, right? You're pushed quite hard to think, and we're challenged to kind of do things. And, we've had owners who are willing to support what we're doing. So we've significantly expanded our customer service team. We're spending more on marketing. We've doubled the size of our products and technology team. So we're really challenging ourselves to raise our standards. And, it's hard. Kind of with new owners, it's never easy, and they're really demanding of us. But I'm loving it, because it's a sign that our kind of ambition has been refreshed, and it's an exhilarating time. And the rebrand is a public show of this. So it's business as usual, but with more swagger.
More swagger. I like it, Phil. Now, Lucy, probably one for you. The new Motors branding will continue to offer dealers multi-site advertising, as Phil says, across the Motors website, but also through this ongoing partnership that you have with Gumtree and eBay. Can you tell us why multi-site advertising is so important to the new proposition, and also how it will work?
Yeah, of course. So we know from our sort of very latest digital touchpoint survey that was done actually this month with 2,000 car buyers, that buyers are visiting more websites than ever before. Actually, on average, 4.2 websites now to find their next car, and that's up from 3.5 in 2021. So it's not surprising, I guess, that considering the car buying options available now and financial pressures that everyone's under to really require more validation and need to hunt down a good deal. And we know that really dealers can't rely on just having their cars advertised in one place. So really, it's very important for us to continue to help retailers with that single access point to multi-site advertising. And we do that through our partnerships with eBay and Gumtree. And this makes sure that dealers can achieve that real sort of scale of audience and be at every stage of the car buying journey. They can't just be in one place. They need to be at every point in the car buying journey, and also ensuring that actually it's also they're advertising with us at a price that really makes sense for their business. So really, it's same way as we've always done, which is dealers can access multi-site advertising through one contract with us, with Motors. They use a central Motors dealer center tool, which they use to upload their stock, and this then sends the stock across the 3 websites. So there's no change there to kind of our package systems and the way they work.
And are you finding this actually resonates with your dealer partners, this whole multi-site advertising proposition?
Yeah, absolutely. I think once we've been doing this for a while now, so we have good experience. Our teams are well trained on understanding how things work, advising our retailers on how best to present their stock. And really, the business is all about making it easy for dealers to kind of come on the platform to get their stock live, and really focus on, so they can focus on what they do best, which is selling cars.
And remaining with yourself, Lucy, I mean, not that you've been busy recently with everything going on, but you've now this week announced you're the headline sponsorship of next year's summer's British Motor Show. Do you want to talk us through some of the decisions behind that and what your thoughts are? Because you were, a back of last year's and what to look forward to next year.
Yeah, of course. So we're really excited about this partnership. It's the British Motor Show is the UK's fastest growing automotive event for families. It's a fantastic opportunity for us. And really, it's the start of a ramp up investment in the Motors consumer brand, which we did start this year. We've been doing a lot of activity, but really we'll be taking that to the next level in 2024. It's a 2-year partnership. It will benefit our dealer partners by helping to drive awareness and consideration of the Motors brand, which in turn helps to drive leads to their vehicles, which are on Motors. We're part of very high profile show marketing campaigns in the build up to the show as ticket sale activity really starts to increase as we go into the spring and summer. And obviously we'll also be at the event where we'll be really championing used cars with the show's family audience and helping showgoers to really understand how to get the most out of their online car searching through our kind of activities that we'll be doing in the Motors Family Zone and the Motors Dealer Showcase. I think it's going to be, a really exciting and amazing event. I'm looking forward to it.
Because there's also an element of car buying at the show as well, isn't there, Lucy?
Yeah, so it's very successful from that point of view in terms of the dealers that are at the show. And are able to, the public are able to browse the vehicles that are there and buy as well off stand effectively. So it's a great opportunity for dealers, and we'll be talking to our dealer partners about the show more in the coming months.
Now, I mean, that is a particularly high-profile sponsorship, and as you say, that'll be over 2 years. Can you tell us how you'll be further promoting the new branding to both dealers and car buyers over the coming months? Any plans you can share with us?
So yeah, absolutely. There's a lot more to come, but what I can tell you today is in early 24 we'll be launching a brand new Motors app. This is really important because we do want to be there for car searchers whenever they need us, wherever they want to go and however they prefer to kind of browse. We really want to make that very easy for buyers to connect with dealers quickly and seamlessly. And all our research tells us just how complex the car buying process is and can be at times overwhelming. And we have now 15 years experience under our belts as Motors. And we really, understand how car searching is happening and the sort of needs of different car searchers. And we've sort of brought this together to really, to kind of put all of that knowledge into this new app. And we know there's a lot more we can do to kind of help car buyers, especially as they go into that road to kind of EV and that transition. So, in addition to that, we'll also be continuing to sort of ramp up our efforts on radio and out-of-home advertising, and our kind of ongoing performance marketing efforts as well.
And final question on the rebranding. What reaction have you had so far from dealer partners?
Fantastic. It's been really positive. We were lucky to be at the Car Dealer Awards this week, as we've talked about, and a great moment to celebrate the new brand alongside some brilliant achievements from the industry as well. So congratulations to everyone who won an award, and the feedback has been really positive, and people loved Monty, our Motors giraffe, who made quite a few appearances at the awards. So, you know, like we said, we are committed to doing things differently, and I think, you know, this week was a real sign of kind of that intention and what's to come.
And thinking about now, we come into the closing weeks of 2023, and we always try and cover some of the high level sort of snippets from the market view, which you publish on a regular basis. But do you want to talk us through some of those key used car trends you're reporting for the November market view at the minute?
Yeah, no worries. I mean, yeah, we were looking at the data just yesterday. You know, we try and get as much of the month done as possible before we report on it. And in honestly, kind of really bracing ourselves, given the amount of noise there's been around wholesale price drops. And, you know, and I don't think any car dealer is telling us it's easy out there. But in all honesty, we're mostly seeing stability. And I say that tentatively because I know it isn't easy there. But, you know, what the data is telling us is that dealers are mostly holding firm on advertised prices. So there are some price drops of sort of 1 to 1.5%, but that's mostly in under 5-year-old cars. Days to sell remain stable and is still slightly better than last year. So the industry's selling those cars faster, and stocking levels have increased slightly. So they're kind of selling cars quickly with slightly more cars as well. So the difficulty is that it's a market of averages, so you really have to sort of scratch away at that. So when you look at the sort of the signs of optimism, it's in the sort of the popular value cars. I think on Monday night someone described it to me as the beige cars. You know, so we're seeing, you know, things like price increases in older cars. So a 14-year-old Ford Focus is up 9%. An 8-year-old Picasso C4 is up 8%. You know, these are kind of like real sort of essential family cars. You know, out at the right value points. So I think there are now opportunities to buy wholesale stock with potential for margin. You know, there's been such shortage of stock in the past. I think that's really kind of started to ease. And yeah, I think everyone was very nervous, and I think there's still a lot of nervousness, but some dealers are now starting to feel braver that they can buy now and have the confidence that, the confidence that they might end up retailing it in January, and that would be okay. So as ever with the market, where there's kind of volatility, there's a bit of opportunity.
And finally, you know, drawing on the data that you've been analysing, and also your conversations with dealers over recent days and weeks, what are your expectations for the used car market going into December and into 2024?
Yeah, I was on something recently with Neil Smith, and he just said the motor trade ruined Christmas for him. You know, you just sit there kind of just watching all your numbers go down as the time goes on. And so, you know, sort of bar humbug across the industry.
Yeah.
So it's always difficult. And, you know, but what's credible? We're looking at some stats earlier. So amazing traffic to our site holds up better than you expect. So on Christmas Day, traffic drops only about 40% versus the rest of December. So it's still like a huge amount of traffic. So there are still people searching. So like the market, you know, you might not be selling cars on Christmas Day, but there will be, you know, there will be lots of people still searching. But we then do see it pick up consistently. It steadies off slightly with a break over the New Year bank holiday from Boxing Day through to the sort of second or third week of Jan. That's really when you get back to kind of sort of run rate, as it were. Massive increases immediately after Christmas Day. So the 27th is usually about 70 to 80% higher than Christmas Day. And actually the 27th to the 30th in general are about a quarter higher than the average of kind of pre-Christmas traffic. So there is definitely kind of I actually think December is kind of a month of 4 weeks, because the first 3 weeks kind of just sort of decline, and then the fourth week, as I say, rockets. And, you know, I think the industry will tiptoe through this December. I really do. But there's lots that tells us that core trading could be quite strong in January. But as ever for dealers, the need to remain vigilant and flexible, and sometimes brave, I think holds true.
That's encouraging to hear, Phil, because I know in previous years we've talked about a Boxing Day bounce, but it sounds like that Boxing Day bounce isn't just on Boxing Day. That does actually run for quite a few days after Christmas Day itself.
Yeah, absolutely. It keeps going. So yeah, as I say, it's that second or third week of January. It's probably by the time you start finding sort of a normal level. It's not unsurprising for us, actually. Sometimes February, which is 10% shorter than January, right, in terms of working days. February, we can generate more leads for dealers than January. So, it kind of really does sort of build. So, you've got to use this time before Christmas to make sure you've got the right stock well presented, because, it will come back with aplomb.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's a funny time at the minute, but everybody's watching very cautiously what's going on for that. I think more than anything else, but it will come back. It'll bounce, and it'll be I think we'll see what the weather's like and how much snow's on the ground, depending on what they're going to be out buying. But we'll see. So I think for me, it just remains me to say, thanks for joining us today, Lucy and Phil. Absolutely a pleasure, as always, catching up. And Curtis and I do wish you all the well with the rebrand. And and we want to personally thank you for continuing to support the podcast. I hope you do enjoy it on the Saturday mornings when you get to listen to it. And thank you for the continued support.
Appreciate
Thanks
it, chaps.
very much. Thanks for inviting us.
Well, plenty happening there at Motors at the moment. That's been a busy old week for them, hasn't it? With the rebrand on Monday, and then the announcement on Thursday of their headline sponsorship of the British Motor Show for the next 2 years.
Yeah, I mean that's a big thing, isn't it, for them and for the British Motor Show as well, to get that 2-year headline sponsor partnership, as I think Lucy referred to it as. I mean, that's great news for them. And really, I mean, in your conversation there, I think you were talking with Lucy, weren't you, saying about the deals are done. It's a great opportunity for dealers to be at that event.
Yes, especially as there is a used car selling element within the show, an integral part of the show. So not only can visitors go and look at cars, they can actually buy them as well. And that's all being supported by dealers. So hopefully over the coming weeks and months, we'll be able to share details on which dealers are involved in the British Motor Show. So a big shout out there to what is now a very important event and part of the calendar.
And as Curtis alluded to at the start of the show, there was on the auto retail agenda on Sunday evening of last week that Lotus is understood to be planning a return to franchise sales model after operating as an agency agreement for the past 2 years. Now, obviously, with this, Lotus, it's not the biggest in terms of market share in the UK from a new vehicle perspective. But I mean, what a statement this is, that after 2 years operating under the agency agreement, that the reporting that they are going to understand to be doing a U-turn on that is quite a significant thing, I think.
It is, yeah, and I mean it's only a short story, this, and it's based on I think it's described as several sources that Auto Retail Agenda have spoken to, and it is worth mentioning that Lotus declined to comment on the story, but it does seem to be very well sourced, and if this does happen, then I think it's pretty much the first time that a brand that's actually committed to agency, gone over to agency, has switched back. Now, it does follow hot on the heels of last week's show where we were talking about the BMW group, weren't we? Because Mini was going to be the first part of the group to go over to agency, but that's now been put on hold. So, and I think it's now not going to happen next year, but 2025. So, so even when brands say they are committing to agency, it's not a done deal until it happens. And even after it happens, as Lotus have shown, it's not set in stone. And it'll be fascinating to find out what actually prompted this, what actually prompted them to do a U-turn on agency.
I say, if it is factual, if it does turn out to be factual, then it's the message into that they'll send out into the market around agency, particularly for the dealer network that, are going through it with certain manufacturers to transition to agency. It's obviously not worked out.
Yeah. More to play out in this one. And final story this week is from Car Dealer. And I'll give a little shout out to David Manchester, because on social media this week, he said that he was listening to the show. And I said to him, happy listening. And he responded by saying, don't know about happy, because I think some of the headlines last week were a bit sort of gloomy. But this is a good positive story to end on, because the headline from Car Dealer is UK car production grows as industry enjoys best October since before the pandemic. And it actually gets better than that, because so the story reveals that 91,000 cars were produced in October, marking the 8th consecutive month of growth. So, a good positive recovery story there. But it goes on to say that the SMMT, based on this strength, has actually reforecast its full year and now anticipates UK vehicle production to actually hit 1 million cars and vans, small vans. And that will actually be up 18% on last year, with further growth anticipated in 2024.
Yeah, and they go in the story talking about obviously more than 4 in 5 cars were shipped abroad, with export growth driven by a 58% increase in shipment to the EU, which remains the UK's largest market by far, and that's accounting for almost 2/3 of the exports. But then it goes on to say that exports to Turkey grew almost fourfold to make it the 3rd largest market, above the US, China and Japan. So that's quite interesting, the way that's starting to play out.
Yeah, and what about alternative fueled vehicles? I hear you say, Phil. Well, production of battery, electric and plug-in hybrid and hybrid vehicles all increased over this period, over the course of October. And with the SMMT saying the combined output now represents 40% of all cars made in the month. And that is a near record high.
So a little bit of a busy week. I mean, there's sort of the 4 headlines there, but quite big headlines in terms of what's happening in the market there. The snippet from Darren Martin, and we'll always say, do head back and listen to that full interview with Darren Martin, to shed some light into that headline figure, to shed some context behind how they look at their values, the reason for the movements, etc. So please do have a listen to the full interview there with Curtis interviewing Darren Martin from CAP HPI. And again, stay tuned for next week, where we catch up with Steve Young in our regular catch up with Steve Young from ICDP, talking all things European dealer market and his view on agency electrification and what's happening in the market at the minute. So do stay tuned for that one.
Yeah, but you know what, Phil? That's all for now. So many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. As Phil says, we're back on Wednesday chatting with Steve Young. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.